WHO is the World Health Organization. It is a UN agency which is primarily concerned with the public health matters on the global scene. And it has two major departments, the non-communicable diseases and communicable diseases. Under non-communicable diseases, there is the control of tobacco use, which has reached epidemics unseen before on the global scene. One of the committees that function under the non-communicable diseases is the Tobacco-Free Initiative. And in it, there is the study group on tobacco product regulation, which I'm proud and privileged to be a chair of that group. It's a scientific group which primarily focuses on the science of tobacco products and to what extent these are harmful to humans. In 2005, the WHO ratified an international treaty called the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, known as FCTC. This treaty has been signed to by 108 countries, known as parties. And this is primarily, the objective of it is to contain the tobacco use worldwide. And every 2 years there is a meeting of these parties in a meeting called as the Conference of Parties, COP. This is held in order to review policies and regulations that can put as decisions which will go to curb the use of tobacco. I was invited to serve on this group in 2004. And one of the topics that got of interest to the group was Waterpipe. And this culminated in an advisory note that was published in 2005, where there was interest in the Waterpipe, particularly in view of the increase globally of the use of Waterpipe in so many communities. There were these traditional communities that were using Waterpipe, but in the first 2 decades of this century, there has been an explosive use in other regions of the world which were not known to be users of Waterpipe. AUB traditionally had several scholars and scientists who were interested in the Waterpipe. So AUB team has been all along very active in the study of Waterpipe, as well as assuming public health responsibility in making recommendations, not only at the regional level, but also at the global level. There are 6 knowledge hubs that have been founded so far by COP, and one of these is the knowledge hub on Waterpipe smoking. And because of what AUB contribution to this field, it was only logical and most reasonable decision is to seek AUB as a site for this knowledge hub. And that's why there has been a memorandum of understanding signed by the head of the Secretariat of FCTC and the president of AUB in order to establish a knowledge hub on campus that will serve this global objective and will be working closely with the WHO in achieving the objectives of curbing the tobacco use globally.
It was a time when narghile smoking was just picking up. People were starting to pick up the habit. And my students asked me, what is worse for us, smoking cigarettes or smoking narghile? And I told them, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Let me find out. I actually don't know the answer to the question. And I found out that essentially there had been no research done on the narghile, even though it's been around for hundreds of years. In contrast, there are thousands of studies available on the cigarette. So I began to be interested in looking into this question. We had to invent some instruments. We made a smoking robot. We made some devices that measure the way people smoke so that we can reproduce that in the lab. And actually those devices now are used around the world. They're not only used here in Lebanon, but we export them to the United States, to Canada, to Europe, and throughout the Middle East. So we had to begin developing methods. We studied the way people smoke in cafes and at homes so that we could develop a protocol, a standard protocol for measuring toxicant emissions from narghile water pipes in the laboratory. And the method later became known as the Beirut Method for testing of waterpipe tobacco products. The first study that we did, we published it in 2003 out of AUB, and we were shocked. We found that there were heavy metals like arsenic and chromium and lead in the waterpipe smoke at much higher levels than you find in cigarette smoke, hundreds of times higher. Charcoal itself is partially burned wood, and it's full of a carcinogen known as polyaromatic hydrocarbons. And those are the main things that cause lung cancer in tobacco smokers. So the charcoal itself is an abundant source, regardless whether you're smoking a masad or not smoking a masad. And charcoal is also the main source of carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a odorless, colorless toxicant that you breathe in, and it harms your heart. Essentially, it kills the muscle tissue in your heart over time. Every puff of argile displaces more smoke than an entire cigarette. So in terms of the sheer amount of particles that you load your lungs with when you're smoking argile, it's beyond comparison with what you get with a cigarette in terms of amount. It turns out that secondhand smoke from the argile is actually worse per hour of use. So if you have two people sitting side by side, one is smoking a cigarette and one is smoking an argile, which one should you remove? That's kind of how we constructed the study. And it turns out that if you remove the argile smoker, it's something similar to removing 10 cigarette smokers during that 1 hour use period. So certainly any law that bans cigarette smoking indoors should cover argile smoking indoors as well. Now there's another concern, which is called third-hand smoke. Smoke particles get absorbed into the furniture, into the carpet, into the walls. And those walls and carpet and furniture give off toxicants over time, and they give off toxicants that have reacted chemically. Chemicals that weren't originally in the smoke, but that appear later. And some of those are even more toxic than the original material that was in the second-hand smoke or in the first-hand smoke. But there's a strong complex of experiences that people have when they smoke argile. Part of it is the smoke, part of it is the sound, part of it is the feel of the drumming of the water. And you hear that, and it's a social experience. So it's a complex behavior, and introducing fruits and other kinds of shapes of argile in the market, plays on that. And it also kind of plays on a notion that it might be healthier. I think part of the reason that people think it's relatively safe is that if the government isn't doing anything about it, it must be safe. Okay, so they're banning cigarettes, but they're not really banning argile, so it sends a message.
Countries that have ratified the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control need to work together to come up with a comprehensive regulatory framework that addresses and tackles waterpipe tobacco smoking. This will only be accomplished through having researchers throughout the world work together to evaluate waterpipe-specific policies. Especially that this mode of smoking is growing not only in the Middle East region, but it's also expanding all over the world, reaching youth and adults around the world. It's not enough to increase the knowledge of people about the health effects, the negative health effects of waterpipe. It's also very important for that mode of smoking to be regulated through policy. We know from tobacco control policies that focus on cigarettes that raising the price of cigarettes and increasing taxation is an effective way to curb smoking. We need to raise taxation also on waterpipe tobacco. Youth are attracted to the variety of flavors that are available in the market, and one way of regulating this and preventing this from happening is also banning flavoring. In addition, there's a variety of forms and shapes that the waterpipe tobacco comes in. And this is very different than when we talk about a cigarette. Other policies that need to be evaluated are in relation to banning sponsorship and promotion of waterpipe tobacco smoking. It's always promoted in a way that's glamorous, that's fashionable. So advertising should not be allowed. When we're talking about health warnings, it's important to also think of not only the tobacco package, but also in the cafes or in public places where people smoke, we have to have health warnings. And those health warnings can be placed on different accessories on the waterpipe tobacco product itself.
Cigarettes and tobacco products are the only consumer products that kill half the users when they're used as intended by the manufacturer. You can't say that about any other consumer product. So they're unique in that way, and they're oriented around the profits of the tobacco companies. Tobacco companies spend about $9 billion a year marketing their products in the United States alone. The total budget for tobacco control in the whole world is $350 million. So there are many concerns about it.
Tobacco control is multifaceted. It has to be tackled at multiple levels. Obviously, education and increasing awareness is only one aspect of it. The other aspect is the regulation, and that's why it is important for governments to include the addressing the water pipe as part of their national tobacco control measures. People know that water pipe use is harmful, but the time has come to take it into the next step to make them more informed users. But at the same time, we need to take it to other factors, to other players, to widen the scope of it in order to bring all concerned parties to be working together in order to meet the objective of more effective water pipe smoking control. Watching the current rampant and uncontrolled practices of water pipe use by young women and men in our societies is no longer acceptable. Staying as bystanders while the tobacco industry claims their health and lives deserves collective and decisive action, and the time for that has now arrived.